What's going on YouTube? Cloverbells here, back with another Series 12 video, and today we're once again looking at VGC fundamentals, and the thing that we're going to be looking at today is stat increases and decreases in Pokemon Sword and Shield. So in this type of game we have Dynamax format where we're clicking Dynamax moves like Max Steel Spike, Max Quake, Max Airstream, Max something. Okay, and when you click those Dynamax moves, you're getting a stat boost to either your attack, defense, special attack, or speed. And also at the same time, when you click other types of Dynamax moves like Phantasm or Darkness or Wormwind, you're decreasing your opponent's stats by a factor that we'll talk about in a second. But when you click these Dynamax moves, how exactly do you calculate them, and how exactly do they influence your team building? And the answer is it's a lot. Okay, and how it does it, we're going to be talking about the numbers specifically, because when you do your team building, you're going to be EVing your Pokemon specifically, so that way you'll either survive certain attacks, you'll either die from certain attacks, or you'll either outspeed or underspeed certain things. But to keep the video nice and simple, we're only going to be talking specifically about speed, because speed is the most important aspect in competitive Pokemon. And you could have the highest attack in the game, it doesn't mean anything if you don't get to go first and you just get KO'd immediately, right? So now that is my disclaimer. So although the concept applies to the other stats, we're only going to be focusing on trying to calculate your speed stat after these Dynamax moves. But again, it all applies for the other Dynamax moves as well, the same way. So how exactly are we going to do that? So now we're going to be shifting over to a Google Doc over here, right? All right, so strap yourselves in. Class is in session. So we have two types of charts here. We have something to calculate your stat increase and your stat decrease when you're clicking certain Dynamax moves. And the rule is that you're always going by a factor of 0.5 every stat bonus that you get, or stat decrease, right? So in this case, I should say stat decrease, but I'll still keep it like that anyway. So if you click, for example, something like an Airstream, a Max Quake, or a Steel Spike, okay, you're getting what's called a +1. Now, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean to get +1? How do you calculate that? Okay, and how does that influence your team building when you're trying to do EVs? So when you get something that is +1, the factor is multiplying that final stat by 1.5. And don't worry, we're not doing calculus or anything. We'll do a few examples where we actually do these calculations, but 1.5 is the rule for +1. Okay, if you click Airstream once, or if you click Max Quake once, or Steel Spike once, okay, it's 1.5. But what if you click it a second time? If you click it a second time, then you get what's called +2, and now the factor is every 0.5. So now it's times 2, okay, right? And then what if you click it a third time? All right, and then now you're at +3. So now you go from times 2, now it's times 2.5, right? Every 0.5 with every stat bonus. And then from here, if I just keep going from +4 all the way to +6, so now after 2.5, all right, it's going to be times 3. Okay, and then if you get yourself to +5, and you might think, well, how do I get to +5? Well, after clicking stuff like Swords Dance, Nasty Plot, and then on top of your Dynamax moves, stuff like this will give you, +5s and whatnot. And it helps to have stuff like Defiant to help you increase even more if your opponent's caught in a bad spot. But that's things for another time. I'm just talking about how to calculate the stat boost. So again, from 3 to 3.5, and finally from +6, the final stat increase is you'll multiply your final stat by times 4. Okay, so a common mistake is for something like Colossal, when it gets something called Steam Engine, where it maxes its speed stat to +6. That does not mean you multiply the speed stat times 6. It's actually times 4. Okay, and we'll show you that when we use the Pokemon damage calculator. But also, what about like stat decreases? So if you click something like Electro Web to decrease speed by -1, if you click Icy Wind, Bulldoze, these are all things to decrease your speed by -1. How does that work? So if it's -1, okay, it's actually a division factor of 1.5, right? And the same thing applies here. Like if it's -2, then you cut your stat in half, all right, and so on and so forth. It's the same exact thing as the stat bonus. Okay, I should really just call this a stat decrease. Okay, and it's pretty much the same thing. So 2.5, all right, that's a 6, and then 3.0, 3.5, and then finally 4.0, right? And this is all, you know, if you get to -4, -5, -6, you know, if you pivot your Incineroar really well and you get something to -6 attack, this is what happens. You know, you take their attack final stat and you divide it by 4. Now, how can I actually apply this? What are some like natural examples where I would use these calcs? So now this is where we go through separate examples where I have prepared. Okay, so now let's transition to the next part of the video. All right, here we go. Class is in session once again. This is sample problem number 1. And again, I'm going to give you guys a chance to, you know, pause through the video and see if you can calculate this stuff yourself correctly. And then, you know, you can play the video again to see if you got it right. So the first question here is, let's assume we have Charizard here, and we are assuming that it is max speed timid. Okay, and the question is, do we outspeed a max speed timid Regieleki after a +1 dynamax move of max airstream? Okay, so feel free to pause the video if you want to try and work this out yourself, or maybe you might already know the answer, but can you prove it? Okay, now you might say, well, I played the game, I experienced it, I clicked airstream and this happens. Well, okay, sure, you might have experienced it, but do you know it mathematically? Can you actually prove it? Okay, because this is a very easy example, but there's other examples that we'll do after this that's not so easy. Okay, and you need to know how to be able to calculate it, because when you're doing your EVs, you have to know these numbers. Okay, so again, feel free to pause the video. Otherwise, I'm just going to go ahead and work through this out in 5 seconds. Okay, so I have the scaffolding here, right? So you have your math classes, and your math teacher always says to show your work. Well, so this is the step-by-step how we do this. So let's say I need to find out Charizard's speed first. Okay, so now what you do is you go into your Pokemon Showdown, you type in Charizard. Okay, and let's find out what Charizard's speed stat is when it's max speed timid nature. Okay, so let's just do it like this. We zoom in. Let's go timid. Okay, and again, the ability doesn't really matter right now, but max speed timid. So what is that final value? It is 167. And again, you don't say, oh, Charizard's speed is 100. No. That's the base stat. We don't care about that. Well, we do, but not like when we're calculating the EVs. We care about these numbers, right? The final values, okay? The final stat of the Pokemon. So for Charizard, it's 167, and this is true for any Pokemon that has a base speed of 100. It's always going to be 167, and we'll talk about that in future videos when we talk about speed tiers of certain Pokemon. But for now, 167 is our answer in the first step of trying to work out this problem. Okay, 167 right there. Now, what about its speed stat after you click Airstream? What is this number now? So if I go back to my chart, if I have +1, that means I multiply my speed stat, which is 167, by 1.5, right? So here it is, 167 times 1.5. Okay, what does that equal? All right, here, you take out your little calculator, and I'll pretend to do this math, even though I actually already know this number because I've done this many times. But you should be getting an answer of 250.5. But in Pokemon, there is no such thing as decimals. It always rounds down. So this is always 250. Okay, this is our answer, right, after +1. So kind of nice. Not bad, Charizard. You're very fast right now. But are you faster than Regieleki? Well, let's see. What is Regieleki's speed number? All right, and again, these are some numbers that you have to know by heart if you're trying to play competitive Pokemon, right? Because this is how you do your EVs eventually. So Regieleki, let's take a look. Max speed timid. Okay, here we go. Nature timid. Max speed 252 investment. This number is 277. Okay, now if I go back to my Google Sheet, my Google Doc, 277. Okay, so what is my conclusion? Does the Charizard after an airstream outspeed the Regieleki? Is 250 greater than 277? Unfortunately for our Charizard, the answer is no. So even after an airstream, our conclusion is the Charizard is not faster than the Regieleki. It needs to click airstream a second time to outspeed it. All right, so that's how you do stuff like this. Okay, so now let's go to a second type of problem where we're still doing this type of math. And again, I'll always be asking you to pause the video to try and work it out yourself, but let's go to practice problem number. All right, this is question number 2. So we're looking at Dialga this time. So let's see if I can actually zoom in and make this a little bit bigger and see if that's actually worth it. That's not too bad actually. So Dialga here. So let's assume that we have a given Dialga EV spread where our stat is 112. Okay, and the question is, can this Dialga outspeed an opposing max speed timid Charizard after the Charizard is hit with an Electro Web? Okay, all right, so now what we do is we have to know a couple of numbers here. First of all, I gotta know Dialga's number. Okay, so again, this is, this will be more done in our future EVing video where we try to EV for certain speed tiers, but this is a little bit of a leeway. So right now, let's just assume the nature doesn't matter. We're at 112. Okay, so this is 12 EV investments, and that gives me a speed stat of 112. Okay, so there's that. All right, so now I go back here. My given speed stat is 112. Okay, and now we need to know Charizard's timid max speed. Well, we kind of already know that from the previous problem, but again, if you were to look back here on Showdown, Charizard at timid max speed is again 167. Okay, so 167. Now, what is Charizard's speed after it gets hit with the Electro Web? So remember, this is a stat decrease. So we're not multiplying by 1.5, we are dividing by 1.5. So once again, I'll give you a few seconds to try and work this one out. All right, so let's see if you are correct. If you said if the Dialga can outspeed the Charizard, the answer is yes. Okay, let's find out how. So what is 167 divided by 1.5? Once again, you take out your calculator, 167 divided by 1.5, and you get this answer. All right, you should get something like 111.33333, whatever. Okay, but again, this doesn't exist in Pokemon. It rounds it down. So this Charizard speed stat is 111. Okay, so now our conclusion: does the Dialga outspeed it? The answer is yes. All right, yes. Dialga's speed of 112 outspeeds Charizard's new speed stat after Electro Web of 111. Okay, so again, that's how we do the stat decrease. Okay, pretty straightforward, right? So now let's look at a problem where now things get a little more interesting. So let's go to sample problem number 3. All right, here it is. Calyrex Shadow Rider. All right, what are we asking here? So the question now is, assume our Calyrex is timid max speed, and assume an opposing Zapdos is also timid max speed. Okay, and those are our conditions. So what is the question? Can this Calyrex with a +1 speed, all right, so it probably got an airstream boost from a partner Pokemon, can it outspeed the opposing Zapdos that has a +2 speed boost? So it probably clicked airstream 2 times, or something next to it clicked airstream 2 times, or it probably got Tailwind. Either way, can Calyrex at +1 outspeed Zapdos at +2? Once again, I will ask you to pause the video and figure this out yourself. I'll give you a few seconds, and then you can play the video again to see if your answer is correct. Okay, so I won't actually say the answer. I will actually work through it, and let's see if you are correct. So first of all, I need to know a few more numbers. Again, we got to show our work, all right, just like your math teacher likes to tell you. So what is Calyrex timid max speed? Well, let's take a look. Let's go back into Showdown. Okay, Calyrex Shadow. And again, I know this number, but you have to know this number. And you might not know it by heart, but this is how you figure it out. All right, max speed timid. All right. So this number is 222. All right, so 222. All right, I'll make this red, so this way you can easily distinguish it. All right, now with a Calyrex speed stat of +1, so I have to do some math. 222 times 1.5. Once again, I take out my trusty little calculator, and I do 222 times my 1.5 airstream boost, and my answer is 333. Okay, that's cool. This is a very fast Calyrex. Okay, you're even faster than Regieleki now. Okay, now what about Zapdos at +2? Let's take a look. Well, Zapdos is the same base speed as Charizard, so it's in the same speed tier as Charizard, and we call this base speed 100s. Anytime a Pokemon has a speed stat of 100, it has the same final speed stat, and here it is. It's going to be 167. All right, so 167, just like Charizard. And then what happens when it gets a speed stat of +2? Well, very simply, you just do 167 times 2, okay, and that is 156. Why did I do that? 167 times 2, and you can do your little calculator math, but it should be 334. Okay, so therefore, okay, at +2, our Zapdos. Now, what is our conclusion? Does the Calyrex outspeed the Zapdos? And the answer is yes. The Calyrex, the Zapdos outspeeds the Calyrex, right? It beats it by +1. So, conclusion: the Calyrex at +1 will not outspeed the Zapdos if it is +2. All right. So that's how you do that math, right? +1 on one side with the Zapdos, completely different speed stat from the Calyrex, which has, you know, the +1. All right, or the Zapdos. Let me run that back. The Calyrex at +1 versus the Zapdos at +2. Okay, and this is how you figure it out. So again, you got to know how to do this stuff, because when you're playing the game, all right, and when you click the plus button and you check to see what speed stats, what boosts that the Pokemon has, if you see that the Zapdos is +2 and you're a Calyrex with +1, that Zapdos outspeeds you. All right, you're not outspeeding it, so you have to know that. Okay, now let's do one last example, and again, it's going to be a very interesting one, so let's take a look. The Kyurem example. Okay, so now let's take a look at Kyurem White here. So it says assume Kyurem White is modest nature but max speed, and assume a Zacian is jolly max speed. Okay, so the question is, can this Kyurem outspeed a Zacian if the Kyurem has a +1 speed boost? So once again, I'll allow you to pause the video and work out this question, and let's see what kind of answer you get. Okay, so maybe you have a very interesting answer, and if you do have a very interesting answer, then you are probably correct. But I won't spoil it. I will actually work through it just to confirm whether you are correct. So once again, let me just remove some stuff here. Let's remove that. Let's add Kyurem White, I should say, and let's add Zacian. Okay, so for Kyurem White, we are modest nature. Okay, modest but max speed. So our number is 147. All right, and then for Zacian, we are jolly max speed. Okay, jolly max speed Zacian. All right, and that number is 220. So almost faster than Calyrex Shadow Rider, but not quite. All right, so these are important numbers. So Kyurem with modest max speed, 147. Okay, cool. Now, what happens when it gets a +1? Well, first, Zacian, you're at 220. All right, can I beat 220? Let's find out. All right, once again, I will take my calculator and I will do the math. 147, all right, times 1.5. Okay, 147 times 1.5. All right, that comes out to 220.5. But remember, once again, in Pokemon, there's no such thing as a decimal here. All right, it rounds it down. So this answer is actually 220. So what this means is you get what's called a speed tie. Okay, all right, and this is why, you know, Pokemon like Kyurem with that base speed 95, it's a little tricky to run their dominant attacking stat, whether you want to do like adamant something or adamant or modest something, it's a little tricky because if you go max speed, you're at 147 and you unfortunately speed tie a Jollyzation, and it's kind of hard to make your games come down to a speed tie. All right, and that's not great. So what you want to do instead is make this not the Zation, make the Kurum timid. This is why you have this, and if you don't do timid, then then you make it come down to a 50-50 between a Zation. Do I KO it with a max Quake Life Orb move, or does Zation KO me with a Behemoth Blade? It's all 50-50. But if I go timid with a +1, now I can outspeed it because I can beat that 220 stat. All right, and again, this is things you have to consider when you're doing your team building and trying to EV your Pokemon. There are some wonky spreads where you can live a Zation Behemoth Blade, but again, this is all for another video. I'm just talking about how to calculate bonuses and decreases here. All right, so yeah, and those are just 4 pretty simple general examples. And again, I only focused on speed, but this is all true for other stats. If you do attack, special attack, defense, special defense, the factors are still the same. If you want to do +1 defense, it's times 1.5. If you want to do +3 defense, multiply by 2.5. If something is -3 defense after 3 phantasms, their factor is divided by 2.5, their final stat. Okay, so let me know if this type of video was helpful in you trying to understand how stat bonuses and decreases work in competitive Pokemon. And again, we do this all during the coaching sessions, even more in depth. So definitely check that out if you're interested in coaching with me, where we sit in a Discord call one-on-one and we just discuss things team building EV wise for your competitive needs, whether you're trying to play in a tournament coming up, or if you're trying to go to a regional, which is a tournament. We do all this kind of basic stuff where we improve your team based on going with the nitty-gritty of the numbers. So definitely check that out in the video description below. We have the tier 2 sub, which is a team fixing criteria where you create a paste of your own, you submit it to me, I fix it up a little bit based on what I think is best and optimal in the meta right now. Or you go with the more popular tier 3 sub, where we actually build a team from scratch from the very beginning. All right, EV by EV. Okay, which is what a lot of people have been doing with me and a lot of people have been enjoying. So if you're interested in that, that is a tier 3 sub to the channel. If you click in the video description or click any video, if you click join, that's what happens. You'll join with a sub, and then just message me on Discord and say, hey, I'm a new sub and I'm ready to do some team building. All right, so yeah, we'll be back with another Series 12 squad. But until next time, guys, peace out and have a good one.